Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, hello. I can tell that you're not in Sussex, Kieran. You seem to be taking part in some kind of understairs hostage video type situation there. It looks like a late night Sky TV show. Where are you, Kieran?
I'm in the attic of a hotel in Liverpool. I think you're right. This may have been used as a film set for at one point for some sort of unusual reality show, which is certainly different, but all is good. That's why I'm probably a bit echoey today.
You are a little bit, yeah. How did you blag your way into the attic of a hotel, Kieran?
I'm skint, and it's the cheapest room in the hotel. So a match made in heaven.
Yeah, don't let the Baroness know you're staying in the attic, will you? That's not the image she likes to portray to the world. It's Newsday, Kieran. We have a lot of news. I think we should probably start by asking a question. We'll set a question for our next pod, Kieran. We won't discuss it in too much depth now, but how on earth have the FA managed to afford Thomas Tuchel? It's going to be a question for us to discuss on Sunday. My dear friend Roy points out to me, because he's got too much time on his hands, that Thomas Tuchel is an anagram of satchel mouth. Same nickname as Louis Armstrong. So it's I was going to say it's a small world, Kieran, but I should really say it's a wonderful world. There you are. Thanks to Roy for inadvertently giving me the opening to the show this week. Love you, mate. First story is one that's been tracking on for some time. It's coming to a head. It involves Manchester City and a tribunal, but not that one. It's Benjamin Mendy, Kieran.
Yes, Benjamin Mendy is suing Manchester City for £11.5 million in unpaid wages. There has been a 2-day hearing, which has now concluded. It took place on Monday and Tuesday. Friend of the show, Nick DeMarco, was representing Mr. Mendy. And I'm not going into the salacious part of that. I think that's for other publications to focus on. But I think there were some interesting issues. First of all, they went into the details of his remuneration, which was, I think it was £6 million a year, £1 million bonus. I think if he plays so many fixtures, there were bonuses also for winning trophies. And that sort of ties in with what we've been saying on the show for some time. Clubs are becoming more and more focused on achievement and performance-related pay, as well as having, let's be honest, a very substantial basic salary as well. I think part of the position taken by Benjamin Mendy is that he was not guilty of a crime. There was analogies made with the Mason Greenwood issue, which of course was also taking place in Manchester, where that player was still being paid his full salary during the course of investigations. And Manchester City's case is based on that there were issues to do with police bail and restrictions and so on. So it's going to take 4 weeks to resolve. So, a 2-day legal case. We're not expecting the verdict for £4 million. It's an £11.5 million claim. The fact that the player had to borrow money from his colleagues at Manchester City shows, I think, there are there are lines that have been formed both within and without of the club as to his position and the way he was treated. And it's very difficult for us. I do not at all want to go down the. Some of the stuff I've been reading is sort of depressing because it's clickbait style, but that's not for us. So we wait, because I think it will set an interesting precedent as to the nature in which a club can prevent a player from being paid. And also, very, very loosely, I think it ties into the Diarra case. If a player is being denied wages, does that mean that there's been a breach of contract by the club, and therefore could the player walk away? And that's what we will be covering in one of the stories in a few minutes.
Yeah, as you say, Kieran, we're reluctant to comment because it does open that horrible can of worms again. But I get to say it now. It will depend what his contract says. I mean, there will be something in the small print of his contract that deals with automatic suspensions for various you can't blame Man City for not playing him at the time. It just depends whether or not there's a clause that says he gets paid when he's suspended. And Nick DeMarco's the man who finds it. And without wishing to sound flippant, Kieran, let's hope Benjamin Mendy does win, because otherwise he won't be able to afford Nick. Let's be fair about this. Another issue that's coming to a head, Kieran, without a doubt, it's really snowballed in recent months, is the amount of games that players are being forced to play the FIFA World Cup. I was thrown out of the Cubs. I was thrown out of the Boys Brigade because they found out I was a Catholic, and then I was thrown out of the Cubs because of my lax 7-year-old attitude to discipline and not being... I couldn't ever see the circumstances in which I'd need to start a fire using 2 sticks, Kieran, to be perfectly honest. And I think that's sullen attitude.
Not in South London. Yeah,
certainly not in South. Well, Uncle Terry occasionally had to start a fire in a hurry, I imagine, but he normally has an accelerant, doesn't he? Yes. But the FIFA World Club Cup has really brought this into focus, and it's getting heavy now. The big guns are ranging against FIFA now, aren't they?
Yes, I think there is a collective response against this competition. We now have a claim from FIFPro, along with Europe's domestic leagues. And FIFPro, for people not familiar, is the players' union, sort of on a global basis. And they've filed a complaint in relation to the current match schedule. And they say that this claim is going through a Belgian court in Brussels. It's challenging the legality of FIFA's decisions to unilaterally set the international match calendar, and in particular, the decision to create this competition. And they're arguing that FIFA's decisions, FIFA is FIFA an organizer of competitions, or is FIFA more interested in feathering its own nest, in the sense that it wants to generate as much money as possible? And we've said that as far as FIFA is concerned, I wouldn't say it's jealous of UEFA, but it's fully aware that UEFA is very successful at generating revenue, not just from the Euros every 4 years, but the Champions League every single year. And I would imagine that Mr. Infantino has gone to the individual football associations. And if you're a country like the Cook Islands, the chances are you're not going to be competing in the FIFA World Cup, but you do get an annual payment. And for all of the criticisms of FIFA, they make a constant, a consistent payment to all members of FIFA on an annual basis. And if it's $500,000 or $1 million, that's a lot of money to the Cook Islands. That's a lot of money to Vanuatu and so on. And you can see why the individual football associations would like it if that £1 million became 2. But if you now have another competition, which is very lucrative, then that could be to their benefit. So Jenny Infantino is looking after Jenny Infantino, as always. But what we've also had in the last 24 hours is our very good friend Javier Tebas, who is fair to say doesn't hold back when it comes to coming forwards. And he's said that this is a competition which is not wanted by fans, it's not wanted by players, it's not wanted by the leagues, it's not wanted by sponsors, and it's not wanted by broadcasters. And it's difficult to argue with any of that because FIFA hasn't sold the TV rights. It hasn't got sponsors for the competition. I'm not aware of any fans, and I've got a limited circle of friends, as have you. You talk to your friends in the pubs. Have any of your friends said, "I'm desperate for this competition to be finalised. I want to apply for tickets." And yet, when it comes to the 2026 World Cup, I'm champing at the bit. For when they go on sale, I'm in there straight away. So the only beneficiaries will be if the competition is a success financially, on which my view there is very little chance. Then there will be more money for FIFA to distribute and for Gianni to preen himself when the trophy is handed over. But Tebas also pointed out, he says it's going to be a financial disaster. And actually, this could come back to bite FIFA on the bum if you don't get any sponsors or broadcasters. And, as we've often said, we're not a cynical show. But if I was a cynic, I expect a broadcaster to be underwritten by a third party in relation to the rights. But that's just conjecture on my part. It could be that effectively that the competition loses money because I think the winners, we're talking, $50 million, which will be sizable, and you've got 32 teams. So I think the entry fees or the competition compliance fees are going to be very high. FIFA could end up losing a lot of money on this, which might have to go back to the individual football association and say, sorry, the $1 million that you were expecting this year is now going to be reduced to 500,000 because the competition hasn't been as successful as it wanted. And there's another huge hole in FIFA's finances because remember, it fell out with Electronic Arts in terms of the video game, which used to be incredibly lucrative for FIFA. And you still talk to your mates, I'll play you on FIFA on the Xbox or your PS5 or whatever it's going to be tonight. Well, that dispute resulted in Electronic Arts walking away, and they're still selling the game by the bucket load, except FIFA's not getting a commission for the use of its name.
Underwritten by a third party, you say, Kieran? No, as you say, I wonder who that could be. I'm sure we'll find out when we tune in for the Saudi Arabian Club World Cup featuring 12 Saudi Arabian clubs and Spurs. I've got good news for you about World Cup tickets, Kieran. We got that story coming up. They've simplified the system. And in answer to your question during that very erudite explanation, I'm going for B, feathering its own nest. But FIFA have also opened a dialogue this week. I love the fact that expression, FIFA opening a dialogue. They're not happy with the global transfer system, Kieran.
Yes. And we've already mentioned the Diarra case. Well, this is FIFA's response to it. And in typical FIFA-ese, we had on a video link, it says, among the topics for discussion are the parameters to calculate compensation for breach of contract, sanctions for breach of contract, and a mechanism to issue the international transfer certificate allowing players to change clubs. What does this mean? It's FIFA. It's FIFA realising that the Diarra case could potentially have very significant ramifications for the transfer market as we know it. And again, listening to lawyers, listening to people involved in the industry, they say what happens in other industries is that you have gardening leave. And that gardening leave can be 12 months, or 18 months, 2 years, perhaps at a push. In football, you've got players who are committed to 5, 7, 9-year contracts in the case of Chelsea. If a player wanted to walk away, could they therefore take on FIFA by saying that effectively you are being prevented from freedom of movement? So I think this is a positive. FIFA is not just digging its heels in. It's not trying to weasel its way out of the consequences of the Diarra case. And I genuinely believe that there's some form of compromise which can be arranged here in which the clubs get a degree of security, fans get a degree of security. You don't want 4 players leaving halfway through the season because they got an offer from somebody else and they just say, sorry, guys, we're playing for such and such a club. Also, as a fan, let's say that, that Brighton and Palace, we're 13th and 10th going into the last 2 games of the season. We're not going to get into Europe. We're not going to get relegated. Somebody comes in and says, we'd like to sign your players. Your 2 best players on each side because we're struggling for relegation or we're desperate to get into the Champions League. And I think from an integrity point of view, from sort of this notion that we have, and the reason why we were so opposed to Super League, and even the fans of Manchester United and Spurs and Chelsea and so on, who benefited the most from Super League, they said, we want to be there on merit. We want to do it through the right reason. I think even the clubs in fans of those clubs would say, we don't particularly want to go about this. If we make a bunch of duff signings at the start of the season in January, we've got to live with it for the rest of the season. All of that could be destroyed if things go, I think, too far on the scale following Diarra. So it's good for FIFA to get people around the table. I think FIFPro will be delighted. I think the PFA and Maheta will be delighted, because when he came on the show, he said, all we want is a dialogue. And what they've been getting for too long, from FIFA in particular, is a diktat. And there's a significant difference between the two.
Yeah, my feeling is if you had Maheta and Infantino in the same room, I think there's only one winner of that discussion. That's a battle of wits where one of the contestants is unarmed. The problem with gardening leave, Kieran, gardening leave of 2 years, this notion, it's fine for somebody who's a chief executive who's probably got 50 years of being a chief executive at various organisations, whereas a player has got a 15-year career at most. You can't have a situation where a player has to not play football for any length of time. That would need to be resolved, wouldn't it? Whatever happens, that's not a potential outcome, is it?
No, and the way that would be resolved, and again, looking at what FIFA have said, is that the player either has to have, let's say that they've signed a contract for 5 years, but they can give a year's notice that they're going to leave at only one point in time. The selling club, for want of a better phrase, could say, we are willing to forego that gardening leave if another club gives us compensation. Now, that is sort of the concept of the transfer fee, but I think it would have to be over a shorter period, which I think the issue would be, we would see transfer fees in terms of their amount fall as a result of this. The reason why clubs like to lock players in on long-year contracts, it means that if Real Madrid come in for Cole Palmer, Chelsea can legitimately say, well, he's our player for the next 9 years. So if you want him, you've got to pay us £150 million, £200 million, and then we'll get round the table. If a player can effectively say, worst case scenario, I sit out playing football for 12 months, then Real Madrid say, well, the maximum we're willing to pay under those circumstances is perhaps 40 million. And that will be the implications for the transfer market. So I agree with you entirely. I don't anticipate players going on extended gardening leave, because there will be a mechanism. But I think the numbers involved and how it's done will be the intriguing concept here.
Mm. Now, we know, Kieran, that recently Everton dodged the most massive of bullets. Unfortunately, events this week showed that 7 other football clubs haven't been quite as fortunate.
That's right. There's been a High Court ruling in relation to 777 partners. And again, we've done this on more than one occasion. Give credit to the Premier League. They delayed, they put the barriers to stop that deal going through. But 777 partners have ownership interests in Genoa, Sevilla, Hertha Berlin, Vasco da Gama, Melbourne Victory, and Standard Liège. And what's now happened is that 777 has effectively been put into a bankruptcy position. A lot of their assets have been taken over by a company called ACAP. And ACAP have also taken over the £200 million loan from 777 to Everton. So, there is an issue here sort of domestically. But I think that's probably a positive, because the Friedkin Group, who are the preferred bidder, and I genuinely think they would be the most sensible of all the options, they've reached an agreement, from what I understand, with ACAP over what's going to happen in respect of that debt. The only issue is that we now have to go to a New York civil court in relation to a separate legal case that 777 have from a London-based company called Leadenhall Capital Partners. So it all gets tied up in knots. But clearly, as you rightly said, Everton have missed an absolute disaster that would have arisen in the case of 777 partners. We're not quite sure where 777 are operating from at present, because in a separate issue, they've been evicted by their landlord in Miami for not paying the rent. So it's an absolute car crash for an organisation. And that car crash has been identified. And again, you've got to give a lot of credit to some of the investigative journalists, the people at Josimar, the likes of Matt Slater and so on, who have been like a dog with a bone. They've not given up. They've constantly highlighted their reservations, and they've dug deep to find out exactly what's been happening in the case of all of this 777 shenanigans.
Yeah, big shout out to the Esk as well, who was going down rat holes that nobody was particularly keen to go down. He did a sterling job, or she did. I don't know who.
Paul Quinn. Yeah, I know Paul. We correspond on a regular basis.
Right. That doesn't surprise me, Kieran. You said earlier on you didn't have many friends. You've got a network of friends, colleagues and grasses all over the world, Kieran. Just to reassure those Everton fans who may have gone, when you said about a civil case in New York, nothing in the collapse of 777 is going to have an impact on the takeover of Everton by the Friedkin Group, is it?
No. Yeah, I think this will be resolved. There's a willingness on behalf of the Friedkin Group to move this forwards. It's a pain in the backside. The concern that the Friedkin Group had initially in relation to 777 is that because it looks like 777 are exposed in terms of what they owe quite a few people, and there are question marks about some of 777's other activities, could there be a Proceeds of Crime Act consequence, which Friedkin Group didn't want to get involved with 3 or 4 months ago? But presumably it's spoken to its legal advisors, and they say, we think that there is a solution to this.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Manchester United, Kieran, a bit of controversial cost-cutting going on at Old Trafford.
Yes, this was a scoop by Adam Crafton, who works for The Athletic, and he's based in New York. He seems to have a very good inside track as to what's going on at Manchester United. And this is a classic case of a club not understanding optics. So the story is that Sir Alex Ferguson is going to be released from his ambassadorial role, which earns him around about, I think it's £40,000 a week. It's around about £2.1 million a year. And this is very much coming from Ineos, partly due to the fact that I think if the Glazers had tried this, and there is zero goodwill from Manchester United fans directed towards the Glazers, then it would have kicked off big style. Ineos still have quite a lot of credit in the bank with a significant proportion of the Manchester United fan base. So the argument is effectively being put in by the club. Sir Alex is not in as good as health as he's always been. It's a lot of money, and he has he's certainly helped to meet and greet people and assisted Manchester United in signing deals and so on. So when the story was released, and we're recording this on Wednesday, so I read Adam's story. That was out on Twitter. I put a sarcastic response to it. United clearly think that Alex is doing nothing, and he's not made a contribution to the club. And so, United then give me a bollocking. They say, he has done this and he has done that. I go, have you lost all concept of terrace humour? And there's an article in The Athletic itself written by another one of their journalists to say perhaps United should take down the statue of Sir Alex. It will save them having to polish it. And we've got the Sir Alex Ferguson stand. Perhaps they should take his name down from the stand and try to sell that to the highest bidder. And I think the optics here just look absolutely terrible. At the very same time that you've got offshore Jim doing the America's Cup race in a vanity exercise, which has cost him millions upon millions of pounds. at the same time as the club thinks it's perfectly okay to sack 250 staff, at the same time that Manchester United thinks it's perfectly acceptable to put up the prices for disabled fans to park, they throw this into the scape. So you've got a billionaire owner who's just treating the football club in a way which shows no sign. We were really proud of Manchester United during COVID, all of the positive things that it's did, and its reputation, its heart, its soul is now being taken apart by Ineos. And I hear stories which I can't repeat, which do not reflect particularly well on their style. I've been contacted by people on social media who used to work for Manchester United, who've been made redundant, to say, "Can you help us in terms of jobs in football, where to look?" This, I'm thinking, hold on, isn't this the job of HR? Have you just gone and thrown these people away? I was giving a guest talk early this week in Manchester for an organisation, and they say we used to have good links with Manchester United for a variety of reasons in terms of coaching and bits and pieces and visits, and that's all now ceased. And I just think that the new owners, yes, they will improve the cost base. I use that word guardedly because by improve, I mean reduce. Getting rid of Sir Alex Ferguson, who did a magnificent job, and even City fans are saying, look, we didn't like him. We didn't like him because he was very good at his job, but we always respected him. And if City had did that for Mike Summerby, or if Liverpool had done similar to Kenny Dalglish, the fan base would have turned against the club. The money save will pay Casemiro's wages for 6 weeks or Anthony's wages for 12 weeks. Who's making a bigger contribution to Manchester United?
You and Man United are bickering a lot lately, aren't you? There's a lot of, I'm going to say, unresolved sexual tension going on there, Kieran. It's like, it's not just the way they're treating Man United, Kieran. As you say, most football fans haven't got enough words to describe the impact that Sir Alex Ferguson had on the game itself. But for Manchester United fans, I mean, it's just, take on the suit, if you like, take on the executives who are getting paid too much, but not Sir Alex Ferguson. And as you say, I imagine the first thing Alex Ferguson would do when this was put to him would be to Google how much does a yacht cost.
Yes.
Jim Ratcliffe's spending a lot of money on coming second to New Zealand they look more like spaceships than yachts. It's just the way this sort of story is presented as well. If you do want to scrap Alex Ferguson's global ambassadorial role, you don't couch it in financial terms. You find a way of saying, well, as you say, Sir Alex is getting a bit older now. We want to take some of the stress away from him and give him a bit more relaxation time. So we've asked him to put his feet up for a bit. That's how you do it. And I'm sure Sir Alex would go along with that. But just to include him as part of a cost-cutting exercise and the fact is Ineos will discover, I mean, we know from experience, we've spoken about this, they have a fairly hard-nosed management style. We know they will go into places and look to cut costs. But how many times have we said, Kieran, football clubs are not the same as other businesses that Ineos have taken over. You can't apply the same thing. And this is a short-sighted move just in terms of PR and goodwill, which is hard to quantify how much PR and goodwill costs. But I should think Sir Alex is bringing a lot more into goodwill than United are paying him in actual cash. Forest, Kieran, I mean, we've all posted things that we wish we hadn't and regretted it immediately, but not to the tune of £750,000.
Yes. If you post something and you regret it, then you delete it. And you put an apology, and that's the appropriate. Nottingham Forest have still got the post in question. So what's happened here is that Nottingham Forest have been fined £750,000, and I've been contacted by Forest fans to ask, where does this count as far as PSR is concerned? And from what I understand, you don't get an exemption from PSR for the fine. So what happened was, following Nottingham Forest's defeat, I think it was against Everton, they tweeted the following: this is coming from the football club, 3 extremely poor decisions, 3 penalties not given, which we cannot simply accept. Well, I don't know, what exactly do they mean by that? That's sort of a bit vague. We warned the PGMOL that the VAR is a Luton fan before the game, but they didn't change him. Our patience has been tested multiple times. NFFC will now consider its options. Right. So there were 3 decisions which the referee gave where he decided it was not a penalty. So it wasn't the referee that they're having a go at. They're having a go at the person in VR. The person in charge of VR was Stuart Atwell. You can argue all day long about individual refereeing decisions. And yes, we've all come away saying, I wouldn't have given that, or I would have given that, or whatever. And yes, you can moan about referees, but not a single person I know who complains about that would say, yeah, give me the whistle and I'll prove that I can do a better job, because the simple reason is you can't. As somebody that's just refereed at a lower level, you give what you see on the day. And the issue here was by saying that Stuart Atwell is a Luton fan, they are questioning his integrity. And for all you might dislike about referees, they are not bent. And this is effectively the argument being put forward by Nottingham Forest. The FA described it as an egregious, direct and public attack. Nottingham Forest could not identify the author. So they're not prepared to say, yeah, this is the member of our comms team, or this has come directly from this executive in the club. So they're hiding behind sort of a collective responsibility here. During the course of the hearing, it turns out that Mark Clattenburg, who was operating as their refereeing advisor, had spoken to Howard Webb 2 days before the match and pointed out that Stuart Atwell was a Luton fan, but did not request his removal. So what are you doing here? And then you get into a more complicated situation. If you are going to say that a referee cannot referee the team he supports, I sort of get that. But if you say the referee cannot referee a match because he supports a side who may or may not be involved in a relegation fight with that team, or may not be involved with a club if your club's going for the Champions League and he or she supports somebody else in the Big Six, you are actually left with a very, very small pool of referees who can referee individual matches. So it's an absolute mess. I think Forest have clearly dug their heels in. They've refused to delete the tweet. I went onto Twitter this morning. It's had 48 million views. So clearly it has attracted a lot of attention. They are unhappy about the fine. They say it's unreasonable. They said that the FA wanted a fine of more than £1 million. Well, the reason why the FA wanted a fine of more than £1 million is as simple as this. If you want to go and accuse people of bias, then you are attacking the whole fabric of the game. Again, we have this notion that I can dislike a referee on an individual basis because he always seems to give decisions against my team. But referees just give what they see, and they are not biased. They are not corrupt. Yeah, they're not in the pockets of individual clubs or anything like that. So that's where we are. But certainly, having read the hearing, Boris seemed a bit cavalier in terms of their tweeting approach. And Mark Clattenburg, who I think it's fair to say won't win the Shine Retiring Man of 2024, for anybody that's ever met him or heard him, he left his position with Forest. I think even he felt it was going too far.
I mean, every football fan can understand Forest frustration. I mean, we've had 7 referees this season who are clearly Brighton fans, so I don't know how that happens. But there's 2 things. That failure you mentioned to identify the author of the tweet indicates to me that it was probably the owner of the club who wanted that tweet sent. Because in situations like this, normally what big companies do is find some lowly little sod and sack him and say he shouldn't have done it. So I think that came from someone very high up at Nottingham Forest. Also, if I was Stuart Atwell, I'd be considering taking legal advice, to be perfectly honest, because that really is a slur on his reputation. And the fact is, we have to accept that all these referees, most of the referees in the Premier League are UEFA or FIFA referees, so they're clearly good referees. They don't get that far as referees without being good referees, Kieran. And yes, they do make mistakes, but you can't go around saying it's the sort of thing you leave to fans who are angry 20 minutes after a game and then 20 minutes later after the first pint, calm down a little bit. It's not a good look that tweet's still there, I have to say, Kieran, to be honest. We have 3 news stories now, Kieran, involving owners of clubs outside the Premier League. And in their own way, they're all intriguing stories. And the first one takes us to Gillingham.
Yes, Gillingham's has always been associated with Paul Scally. Again, let's put the cards on the table. Paul Scally is highly unpopular with Brighton fans because Brighton ended up playing at Gillingham for 2 years, and I think they tried to get out of the deal after 1 year, and he wouldn't let them, which he was perfectly entitled to do. But again, as a fan, you never forget these things. And I believe he lives in Dubai, but he has been voted off the board of Gillingham Football Club and also its holding company, GFC Holdings. So the reasons behind that, it's one of those things where I think some people have started digging, and we shall await to see what is published or is not, or perhaps even not is published. Might even be more interesting. But clearly, there were things taking place, and I'm not a fan of Paul Scally. I'm also not a fan of some of his managers who I think treated him really badly. But we can't do that story. Perhaps we'll cover that story in our live show. But it does seem very unusual for somebody that's been so senior and connected with the club for such a period of time to effectively be booted off the board of directors. But this went to a vote. Gillingham Football Club did pay, I think it was a £13.4 million dividend in 2023, which that went to all of the shareholders and not Paul Scally. I think some people are trying to put two and two together and get five. It's a shame that things had reached this position, but clearly there's been a breakdown in the relationship. Don't think there'll be too many tears shed by fans. But as we always say, just be careful what you wish for. He ran a tight ship at Gillingham and he ran a sustainable football club. There are many things which you might not like about the guy, but you've got to take a look at a bigger picture.
So if anybody in the London area is still in two minds about whether or not to try and buy the last couple of tickets available for Thursday night, tonight's show at the Bedford, our live show, the fact that you will, without 100% definitely be telling us some Paul Scally stories that you can't tell us.
No. I'll consult our lawyers beforehand.
And we'll persuade you to tell some of those Ineos stories that you can't tell as well. That's got to be worth 18 quid of anybody's money. Paul Scally's been associated with Gillingham it must be getting on for 30 years, Kieran, hasn't it now?
Yes, yeah. I mean, well, Brighton went there in 1997, so that's 27 years ago. He negotiated a good deal for Gillingham Football Club, which he's supposed to do. So as much as I resented it at the time, and nobody wants to go and do a 150-mile round trip for a home game, he did what was best for his club.
I know he has a certain reputation, Kieran, but anyone who pisses off Brighton fans can't be all bad, can he? Swindon Town, Kieran.
Yes, there's been a press release from the Supporters Trust, which is, I think, have been critical of the owner, Clem Morfuni. And on the back of that, Clem Morfuni has defended himself, and he's put out a long statement, which, again, on reflection, I always talk to people about the difference between a reaction and a response. And a reaction is what you've just been saying in terms of what you might want to tweet at the end of a match, or what Nottingham Forest chose to tweet at the end of their match where they didn't get the decisions that they'd hoped for. And a response is sitting back, reading criticism, and none of us like criticism, and perhaps saying, I need to take this on board, I need to reflect on this, perhaps we need to get around the table and discuss and resolve a thing. Putting out a press release, he was saying, the club was just 10 days away from administration when I took over. We effectively opened a bit of a can of worms and so on. And he's been sort of quite hostile towards the trust, at the same time saying that, had it not been for funds from a fan who and a trust which had been set up by a fan, Swindon would be in a far worse position. The chief executive, or former chief executive of Swindon Town, he left, and yet we can't go into the details of that. Again, I think it was partly due to there were issues to do with Clem Morfuni's ownership and running of the club. It looks like Morfuni has borrowed money to help fund the club, some of which has caused him problems as well. But when I do assessments of individual owners, we assess, as we said in the live shows, we effectively go down if people ask a question, and my response is, you've got to decide, is this person an idiot or an arsehole? I don't think Ten more phone, is an arse. I think he means well. I think he's doesn't realise the scale of what he's got into in terms of running a football club and the challenges that has brought. And he says the club's not up for sale, but I would, if somebody comes in with an interesting offer, whether that would be his response is another matter.
Is there something between idiot and arsehole, Kieran? Oh yeah, perineum. You've got a very infectious laugh, Kieran. I love making you laugh. I say this with a heavy heart, Kieran, but the third club owner in this little section of the show is Dai Yong.
Yes, this is an interesting. This was a story which was from Matt Hughes in The Guardian. I've had a bit of pushback from Reading sources. So Dai Yonga is the Reading owner. It's fairly common knowledge that the club has been up for sale. It's fairly common knowledge that the club has had a lot of problems, which have resulted in a series of points deductions, the atrocious treatment of the women's team, for example, added on to that as part of cost cutting. And cost cutting's never easy, but when you've got billionaires doing it, and at the same time you see the properties that they own in London, you go, I've not necessarily got a lot of sympathy here for the person at the top. But the issue here, the story was that we were aware that the former owner of Wycombe Wanderers, Rob Cohig, had been in negotiation to buy Reading Football Club. He'd been seen with a Reading scarf. He'd been seen in town. There was clearly a bit of a PR exercise taking place. And then that deal collapsed. Well, the story which The Guardian are now running is that Dai Yonga owed £55 million to a Chinese bank called Haitong International Securities. And the issue was that the loan had not been repaid. And under the terms of the loan, if they didn't get paid on the next set of due dates, they could take ownership of Reading Stadium. And that, of course, meant that if I was Rob Cohig, I would walk away from the deal, and you can understand that. So that's where we stand on that. The club sources we've sort of had some sort of contact with indirectly said we don't see it that way. We think the story's been perhaps a bit salacious without seeing the documentation. And again, we've got to stress, you and I, we are pub lawyers, so we're not in the position to read a legal document and necessarily draw the conclusions from it. But it's just another sad day in respect of Reading. Reading have also been in contact to say that I was wrong, and my sources were wrong in terms of Dai Yonga having a friend based in China or Hong Kong who somebody now has exclusivity. They've said we're wrong. Okay, we're wrong. Well, we hold up our hands and say we were wrong.
It's pointless Reading getting in touch with us to say that, Kieran. It's the fans they should be telling it to, not us. Good news for the Women's Super League. A lot of eyeballs on Women's Super League games this season, Kieran.
That's right. You can now watch the Super League games on YouTube. So there is a YouTube channel, and the viewing figures have tripled. And I've tuned in. Last weekend, international break, it was two clubs which are close to our hearts playing each other. So I turned it on. And if this is the way forwards, and I think as far as the Women's Super League is concerned, there is a trade-off between trying to maximise revenues from broadcasting, and does that mean that they have to go past a paywall? If you go past a paywall, you're automatically cutting off a significant number of people who say, "Yeah, I'll watch it, but I'm not prepared to pay for it because I'm not that committed." And the other side of the argument is that you grow a fan base by saying, "Oh yeah, I watched that match. It seemed to be a good atmosphere, decent standard of football. The teams are well matched." And therefore, you could then become, I tell you what, I'll pop along the next time those two teams are playing and watch the next one, perhaps, and physically turn up. So that's position. But it's a sign of the WSL is moving in the right direction. The Arsenal-Chelsea match, that had a decent crowd, both physically on Saturday, and again, it was given broadcast this time on BBC. So I think they are trying to build up the fan base. It is a challenge, because just like every other sport, everything gets squeezed out by the Premier League and the EFL over the weekends. But this was a good opportunity last weekend to see what's on offer for fans.
Is this online channel part of the existing broadcasting deal, Kieran, or is this something the WSL have set up and are therefore getting all the money from?
This is part of a much broader issue. Yeah, there is a deal with the BBC, there is a deal with a satellite broadcaster, and for those matches, effectively, the main broadcasters get first pick. But what you are able to do, and this is quite similar to the position that we have with the EFL going forward, is that you can watch an awful lot more matches on the equivalent of the red button. Sky, the new Sky deal with the EFL means that there's a considerable number of matches you can watch. And I think on a Tuesday night, you can watch your choice of practically every match as far as the Championship is concerned, for example. So it's a separate deal, but it is sort of secondary. You wouldn't see Arsenal versus Chelsea necessarily taking place on YouTube because the BBC have got the rights to it.
I watched Palace under-21s play Gillingham in the EFL trophy behind the red button, and I was just thinking, what a wonderful world we live in, Kieran, that I can watch a match in my own home that 35 people are watching in the stadium. It's fantastic. Our penultimate news story, Kieran, is good news for you, as we indicated earlier on. Good news for you and all those other people who want to just buy a ticket for a 2026 World Cup group game. Should be quite simple, isn't it? Just buy a ticket, pick a game, buy a ticket, off we go. So tell us how FIFA have managed to balls this up, Kieran.
This is absolutely fantastic, Kevin.
I knew you'd like this. If
I buy one of FIFA's digital cards, which have dropped, we have those discussions with producer Guy. He says, looking at the demographics of the show, the average person who listens to The Price of Football is a 52-year-old male. Well, I've just connected with Generation Z. Isn't that so cool of me?
Well, by using the word dropped.
Use the word dropped. Yeah.
Gen Z have probably dropped that. They probably dropped that 2 days ago. So
probably did, yes. So if you buy a FIFA digital card, you buy 3 of them for $15,
right,
and you get the equivalent of a normal card. A normal card. There are lots of normal cards. Then there are, I think, platinum cards and super rare cards, which are exactly the same. It's a picture of a footballer, and around the perimeter of it, it's got a different colour. Apparently, the gold ones and the platinum ones, and the one we say VR for very rare or whatever it is, are very rare, and they could be worth a fortune if you can find an idiot to pay that money from you for your pixels. But also, if you buy enough of these packs, you effectively go into a lottery, which would then give you the right to buy a ticket for the 2026 group game. None of the knockout names. You're not that good enough. And of course, the more packs you buy, the more chances you get to get effectively a winning lottery, and then the chance to watch. It could be Bulgaria versus Ghana taking place in Houston, or you might not. Because just because you buy a pack does not guarantee you a ticket. It just means that you go in a lottery, and the winning lottery people, a bit like I applied for tickets to see The Cure at the BBC, and they sent me an email to say, yes, they say, sorry, you put yourself in the lottery and you weren't a winner.
I'm sorry to hear that, Kieran. Sure,
yes.
Explore other avenues. I'm going to refer you back to our very early in this news pod, Kieran, and go B, feathering its own nest. Our last story, Kieran, we are quick to criticise clubs on this podcast when they don't do the right thing. Here's a club, Kieran, that are doing the right thing.
Yes, and just contrasting some of the clubs which we've referred to earlier, who clearly just see the football club as a business, the football club as bottom line. Hats off to Panathinaikos. George Baldock joined the club only a couple of months ago. We had his tragic death last week. And what Panathinaikos have said, we are going to honour his 3-year contract, and we're going to pay that money across to his wife. He's got a 1-year-old child. I think they're also arranging some form of tribute match. And again, the proceeds of that will go to the family. And I think this show has shown quite a few reasons why we want to be proud of football. It's a central part of our life. And this is the one story I think we can pick up from today's episode. Yeah, actually, this is a club that gets it.
Yeah.
And fair play to them, and nothing but admiration.
Yeah, and the thing is, Kieran, if owners of other clubs are listening, you can't quantify this, but the amount of goodwill that Panathinaikos get for this is fantastic. Next time I'm watching Panathinaikos game on TV, I'll want them to win. And when Panathinaikos are mentioned in conversation, it won't happen a lot, but I'll go, oh yeah, they're the team that did the right thing when it comes to George Baldock's contract. And I think for fans of that club will be very proud that they've done that, Kieran, and it will buy them a bit of extra goodwill around the world. And I think every now and again that is more important than money. It's as simple as that.
Well said.
Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page, including Mark Bernstein, who's a very old mucker of mine, Paul Pearson, Ian Brown, Russ Ince, Brian Telfer, PJ Jordan, Anthony O'Donnell, Aaron Waite, Ed McCloskey, Sean Willisey, Nick Kelly, Steve Garrett, Chris Smith, Garrett Pridding, and Trevor Babson. And if you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, as well as all those lovely people, and it'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, the big Christmas one coming up, you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X and find us on YouTube. And if you want to buy our book, you can schlep all the way to a bookshop or just go to our website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be seeing some of you tonight at the Cheerful Earful Podcast Festival in Balham. We look forward to it. And we'll be back on Tuesday with our regular questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Thank you, as always, for everybody getting in contact with us, including some clubs. If we do something that upsets you, give us a telling off. I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. We're football fans, by the way. There's a variety of ways that you can support the show, and thank you to all the Patreons for giving us their support. It doesn't mean that you can get in contact with us through our Discord channel, which it's a bit quiet at present, but I'm still chipping in. There's another way that you can support the show, and that's to give us a review and to pop onto your app and say something. You say something nice. You can say something horrible. You could even say you would rather the show was presented by Gianni Infantino and Jermaine Greer. And I think that would be a fascinating show, because there's no doubt that Gianni would say, today I feel that I'm a feminist. And I look forward to that, Gianni.
Oh my God, she'd run rings around him, wouldn't she? That'd be hilarious.
Yes.
I think we could make this one happen, Kieran. Well, we could get one of them. That'd be great. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.